while Himyar priced a strait, a power on the steppe priced rivers. Picture spring ice cracking on the Volga and Don, silver glinting in sacks, furs stacked like walls, and a court that sold something rare between two missionary empires, neutrality for rent. Stakes were blunt. To the south and west, Byzantium armored itself with gold and theology. To the south and east, the caliphate stretched law across deserts and gardens. The Khazars sat between, where water turned trade into tribute. If they kept both giants talking to them, not past them, they skimmed coin from every current. If one giant found a way around, the toll booth turned into an empty fort. Action starts with a double crown that diffused risk. A sacral Khagan sat above politics. A Bek ran armies and day-to-day deals. Assassination lost its point when killing one head didn't crash the body. Fortified towns, Balanjar, Samandar, then Adal on the lower Volga, choked roots like knots tied in a rope. Caravans arrived under pre-negotiated flags, furs, wax, and slaves downriver, silks and silver upriver, pepper and glass when the Black Sea cooperated. Meanwhile, courts needed rules merchants trusted. The Khazar move, famous because it stunned neighbors, was adopting Judaism at the elite level sometime in the 8th or 9th century. Theories vary on timing and scope. The practical effect is clearer. In a world where missionaries doubled as diplomats, a third path signaled, "We'll judge you without being you." Adal's market judges learned oath formulas across creeds, penalties that bit without starting feuds, and procedures that moved goods instead of grudges. This was the moment everything changed on their balance sheet when new competitors learned the rivers. Norse adventurers, the Rus, shouldered longships over portages, linking the Baltic to the Black Sea and the Caspian in one season. At first, they paid Khazar tolls, then they sampled the margins and grew bolder. Raids along the Caspian shores, alliances with Byzantine envoys, and private deals with towns upriver began to bleed Khazar revenue without breaking their walls. Stakes tightened because trade lanes were shifting under their feet. As Black Sea links fattened and maritime routes stitched tighter to Mediterranean ports, the premium on moving cargo along forested corridors dropped. Caliphal silver still flowed north in salmonid dirhams, but hoards, hacksilver cut for weight, tell a story of changing hands and thinner fees. When a middleman's edge is speed and safety, every new shortcut erases a line from his ledger. Action on the steppe never paused. Khazar diplomacy ran in parallel to defense. They partnered with Byzantium against steppe rivals. They fenced with Arab frontier commanders who wanted the Volga line soft. Tribute webs bound vassal tribes with gifts and hostages. The Bek moved troops like a shepherd moves a flock, harassing where sieges made no sense, conceding ground where marshes killed horses faster than arrows did. Capitals shifted with the margins. Balanjar burned, Samandar took its turn, Adal rose on river islands like a warehouse married to a court. Meanwhile, inside the market, a judge's day looked like logistics disguised as law. A Muslim buyer, a Christian carrier, a pagan guarantor, weights stamped in Greek, debts recorded in Arabic, testimonies sworn over different books. The settlement mattered more than the creed. A middleman's credibility is his moat. But there was one problem no moat could solve. When someone else can sell the same neutrality cheaper, and sometimes with ships faster than horses, the product ages overnight. Rus, princes consolidated, played terror and treaty as needed, and wrote their own tolls into river towns. Byzantium learned when to use Khazars and when to bypass them. To the east, steppe confederations moved like storms, sending shockwaves that turned the Volga plain into a chessboard played at speed. This was the moment everything changed in the chronicles, not the soil. Adal fell to a Rus raid in the 960s, according to later accounts. Arab geographers wrote of decline. Byzantine writers alternated praise and mockery depending on alliances. The Khazars didn't get to author their ending. Later powers needed them as cautionary characters, not as teachers of river law. Impact didn't vanish with the name. Earthworks still traced defensive lines along the Manich and the lower Volga, funnels for caravans and raiders alike. Coin hoards mapped commerce like constellations. Legal habits migrated north. Novgorod's multi-faith arbitration, layers of oath-taking, fines calibrated to keep trade moving. The fortress and fee model shows up again wherever a narrow could be priced: straits, mountain passes, border marts. A micro scene catches the hinge. Spring thaws slap Adal's docks. A Jewish judge listens while a Muslim silk buyer accuses a Christian skipper of shorting bales after ice delayed departure. Oaths are sworn with different words and the same eye contact. The verdict balances weight, wind, and custom. Both men accept because the alternative is knives on planks. The judge steps outside and clocks deeper draft prows riding low with cargo, painted with crosses and dragon heads. He understands that fair rulings won't hold a river if the river learns new lanes. Vanishing landed as dispersal, not silence. Titles outlived tax districts. Vassals found new patrons. Fort mounds softened. Stories soured. The gatekeeper lesson is plain. Choke points mint states until roots rewire. Then the rulebook you wrote keeps working under other flags, and your name fades in the margins of the very ledgers you taught others to keep. The Khmer Empire, early Angkor, when water made a superpower and ended it. While river tolls decided fates in the north, here power flowed from monsoon rain that couldn't be trusted. Early Angkor learned to trap a season and spend it like money. The landscape itself became a ledger, embankments as margins, canals as entries, reservoirs as vaults. Rice wasn't just food, it was payroll, tax, and faith. Stakes were simple to say and brutal to miss. If the rains arrived and the channels worked, 1 million people ate and a god-king looked blessed. If rains slipped their cue or came like a wall, silt clogged arteries and legitimacy curdled. Angkor's genius, turning water into order, could become its weakness with 2 bad years in the wrong order. Action starts with ambition carved in sandstone. At Haraharalia, engineers straightened streams, cut feeder channels, and raised the first Great Barre, a man-made lake aligned to the horizon. Then kings scaled the idea until it read as myth. The East Barre like an inland sea, embankments miles long, spillways notched to sip the flood. From a distance, it looked like worship. Up close, it was accounting. Meanwhile, the city spread like a map of intent. Gridded neighborhoods interlaced with rice paddies, roads that doubled as levees, causeways that bridged wetlands and wet politics. Every rain added a temple mountain, Bakung, then Phnom Bakheng, then the symmetries of Angkor Wat, state propaganda telling farmers the cosmos agreed with the tax rate. Bas-reliefs turned walls into archives, procession lines of rice, ox carts, fish nets, census hands ticking names. This was the moment everything changed when the monsoon started to swing. Whiplash years, too much, too little, too late, hit infrastructure built for steadier cycles. The West Barre's vastness couldn't hide maintenance math. Channels needed dredging before they silted, spillways needed clearing before floods tested them, and every prestige project stole labor from the ditch. Elites competed in stone while margins narrowed in mud. Action on the ground looked like improvisation under pressure. Bypass canals cut around clogged stretches, ceramic pipes threaded under causeways. Spillways were armored with laterite blocks. Moats around temples doubled as regulators, bleeding off peak flows when skies dumped a month of rain in a night. It worked until it didn't. Stakes climbed as politics and water tangled. Succession disputes and rival polities pulled manpower sideways. Patronage favored new sanctuaries with fresh inscriptions over old culverts with none. A supervisor skipped a section because a cousin needed masons for a tower face. The decision would matter the first time 2 drought years bracketed a flood. Meanwhile, downstream, the coast learned to steal attention. Maritime trade fattened along nodes tied to the South China Sea. Ports at the Mekong mouth promised quicker paybacks than inland rice. Merchants who once needed the king's roads could now ride tides to markets that didn't tithe to Temple Mountains. The middle moved quietly. Then crisis arrived as a sequence, not a day. A late monsoon filled channels with sediment-heavy torrents. Armored spillways held, but paddies drowned. The next year, rains failed early, reservoir surfaces shrank, weeds choked inlets, and pumps of human muscle came up short. Repair crews were thin, commanders argued. Another foundation stone was laid with speeches about cosmic order. Farmers hedged, more fish traps, fewer fields, fewer cartloads reaching the city. A foreman's ledger turned into a warning. He stood barefoot on a laterite lip, counted baskets, and traced a notch carved with last season's high mark. Today's line was lower. He sent a boy running to borrow crews and got 2 men and excuses. He knew the court's hymn about the king mastering the waters. He also knew tomorrow's dredge list. Vanishing wasn't a sack, it was a migration of authority. The capital budged toward riverine trade nodes that didn't demand such relentless maintenance. The hydraulic web still worked in patches. Villages kept sections alive because their dinners depended on it. But the centralized promise, the state as master of water, felt less true with every thin harvest. What they left is both map and manual. Lee Dar peeled jungle back to show a city without a neat edge, mounds, tanks, and grid lines tying households to reservoirs the way wires tie apartments to a grid today. Bas-reliefs at Bayon still show levee crews and bridge repair, maintenance immortalized in stone. The barres demonstrate principles engineers still use. Buffer the spike, separate flood storage from daily supply, build redundancy across basins. Impact sits in our habits. Complexity isn't a monument, it's a subscription. Systems fail quietly when many small fixes get deferred across too many budgets for too many years. Angkor didn't end so much as decentralize. People shifted downriver, traditions followed, the name changed costume. A last scene holds the feeling. Evening on a canal lip, dragonflies skimming a surface pulled thin. The foreman runs his thumb along the wet mark, then presses harder so the line will be legible next season. In the distance, a bell from a new sanctuary rings over speeches. He lowers the basket anyway. Tomorrow needs water, not words. The Garamantes, masters of the Sahara's hidden rivers. From monsoon jungles to stone desert, now the miracle with no rain. In Libya's Fezzan, the Garamantes built cities where maps warned nothing. Their secret wasn't wells, it was tunnels that sipped an ancient sea underfoot. Power rode underground. Stakes were thirst and motion. Control an oasis set the price of survival. Chain oases across valleys and you tax every caravan moving between Mediterranean ports and the Sahel. Gold dust north, salt south, glass beads both ways, and captives whose stories never made it to ledgers. Rome complained about raids from the south. Desert peoples called the Garamantes a market that never closed. The risk was embedded in the miracle. Their water was inheritance, not income. Action looked like engineering in the dark. They dug fagaras, gentle slope tunnels that tapped fossil aquifers and drifted water toward town like a whisper. Vertical shafts punched at intervals gave air and access. By lamplight, crews scraped silt, checked grade with a string and a drop, and chased a trickle until it pooled. After miles, the flow surfaced into mother channels, then braided into fields. From above, the shaft dots run ruler straight toward hillsides. From below, the air turns cool and smells faintly of limestone and wet dust. Meanwhile, towns rose where gravel fans met that quiet water. Garama modern Jarma in the Wadi Al-Ajal was the hub, with satellite settlements spaced at a camel's daily pace. Mud brick houses with shaded courtyards held heat by day and surrendered it at night. Storerooms banked dates and barley like coin. Workshops fired glass and worked leather. Alleyways funneled dusk winds. Caravans slid in chalk white with salt, or glinted with gold grit rubbed into pouches, and left stamped with the Garamantes cut. This was the moment everything changed when Rome finally rode far enough to care. Governors in Tripolitania sent punitive columns south to discipline raiders. Legions burned fields and outer hamlets, then discovered a physics problem. Walls don't matter if your enemy can vanish into stone. Garamantian fighters slipped into Fagara mouths, surfaced a valley away, cut the Romans' water, and let the sun finish the argument. Rome inscribed victories. The Garamantes kept charging tolls. Stakes sharpened as trans-Saharan traffic thickened. Northbound, merchants brought gold and enslaved captives from the Niger Bend. Southbound, salt and Mediterranean goods. The Garamantes didn't need to conquer the desert. They needed to choreograph it. Safe stages, honest scales, cool water at sunset, predictable fees. Reliability was sovereignty. But there was one problem no spear could fix. Fossil aquifers don't refill on human schedules. Every year the intake lip shaved lower into rock. Every skipped clearing let silt climb. A fagara fails without spectacle. A shaft collapses silently after a rain, a gallery roofs with salt crust, airflow dies, and the garden at the mouth turns to powder. Maintenance is policy. When young men can earn coin on caravans faster than blisters in tunnels, labor drifts. Meanwhile, beyond the dunes, the coast learned shortcuts. Hulls grew and found winds to carry goods that once needed oases and a dozen bribes. A cargo that paid the Garamantes 3 times a year now cleared a port once. Add insecurity, bandits testing lanes, a governor upriver underpaying escorts, and the ledger thinned. A middleman survives on margins and habit. Habit changed. Action inside the oasis became triage. Overseers rationed hours, 2 crews for a clogged gallery, 1 for a salt-scabbed lip, none for an extension that might have fed a new plot. Old men ran fingers along damp rock, felt the cool farther back than last season, and told a nephew to adjust the slope by a finger's breadth over 40 paces. Fields were replanted smaller than in crops that forgive lateness. Dates forgave the most, wheat the least. A micro scene holds the sound. Night, a lamp lowered into a shaft. A foreman drops to the gallery, crouches where ceiling brushes hair, and sets a string on 2 pegs. The line sags wrong. He scrapes a handful of silt, hears the faintest trickle brighten, and smiles without showing teeth. Above, a bell clinks once and stops, camels kneeling. He climbs, wipes grit, and meets a trader with sea salt crust on sandals. The man says a new buyer will pay more in a coastal town if they skip the inland chain. The foreman looks east where his shafts run and west where the wind smells of emptiness. He nods because anger won't lift water. Vanishing arrived like skipped chores. A shaft left half cleared this week, a neighbor's field a shade paler next, a family gone by moonlight promising to return after harvest that never comes. Town walls outlasted voices, the desert one without a shout. What they left is visible from orbit. Satellite images stitch dotted lines across Pheasant's valleys, hundreds of Khazar systems feeding thousands of fields over centuries. On the ground, you can still step into a cool tunnel at dawn and hear pebbles click under slow water, a sound like memory. Pottery, glass offcuts, bead spills, and date pits thicken house floors. A city's pulse counts in seeds. Impact stretches into modern pipes. Libya's great man-made river tapped similar deep water with pumps instead of picks. The caution doesn't moralize, it counts. Finite reservoirs feel like wealth until they don't. Extraction without recharge turns infrastructure into archaeology. The Garamantes wrote that lesson in the dark. Their reputation got edited. Romans called them raiders, later writers made them rumor. The soil is kinder. It remembers systems, not slurs. And the rule still applies anywhere thin water meets thick ambition. Cover the channel, lose evaporation, set the slope true. Space the shafts for human legs, price the crossing fairly, and never call maintenance tomorrow if you want your name to outlive your walls. The Songhai Empire, the golden ledger of the Sahara. Trade winds turned east, but on the Niger Bend, books and gold still set the clock. Songhai rose where a river curled like a shepherd's crook and caravans hooked into its elbow. Gao throbbed with metalwork and markets. Timbuktu stacked pages like grain. Authority wasn't just spears. It was ledgers, ferries timed to flood, and scholars who made trust portable. Stakes were layered. Whoever priced the caravan set soldiers' salaries from dunes to delta. Whoever funded scholars wrote legitimacy into the throne. Songhai inherited lanes from Mali, but needed a different tool to hold them. Reform that made distant towns bet on the center and win more often than not. Action began with a soldier who saw like an accountant. Mohammed Tur, Askia the Great, took power in the late 15th century and wrote policy into muscle. Provinces got governors who owed the capital more than kin. Taxes flexed with season and river height, so a bad flood didn't topple a prefect. He listened to jurists, staffed Sharia courts beside customary ones, and hit pilgrimage not as theater but as supply chain diplomacy. Alliances, scholars, calendars. Meanwhile, the Niger was a road with seasons. Songhai built coasting barges, lined depots at fords, and scheduled convoys when water lifted hulls over bars. Pilots read eddies by color, soldiers shadowed banks, quartermasters counted dates to the well. Askia's army wasn't just horse and bow. It was logistics, grain accounted by cubit, ferry crossings by moon, arrears noted before they metastasized into mutiny. This was the moment everything changed in the bookrooms. Timbuktu's Angkor and its sister madrasas turned a dry city into a memory machine. Copyists lined papers with red rubric, jurists wrote fatwas on trade disputes, astronomers graphed eclipses in margins, and chroniclers stitched kings to justice. Merchant guilds learned those rules and priced risk around them. A scholar's ink steadied a porter's back. Songhai wrapped those pages around profit. Gold from the south met Taghaze's salt under walls that understood both. Brokers switched tongues like tools, Songhai for the street, Arabic for the contract, Tamashek or Hassaniya at the gate. Customs officers stamped trust. A caravan that paid in Gao expected credit in Jen. The river made enforcement real. Stakes rose as firearms crept into the plot. Across the Sahara, Morocco, rich in ambition, poor in revenue, eyed Songhai's ledger. If the Sultan could grab the southern gold flow, he'd steady his books. On the coasts, European hulls whispered another insult. Cargoes of cloth, beads, and guns that could siphon value faster than a camel train ever could. If wind beat sand, the caravan's price would wobble. Songhai wasn't asleep. It could field tens of thousands, stitch a front along the river, and punish a city that forgot the tax. But there was one problem: court fractures drained focus. Succession arguments nibbled at reform. A governor who felt underpaid stalled a levy. A cousin promised safety to a trader for a private cut. Maintenance of trust, the quiet chore, started to slip. Meanwhile, in Fez, a plan hardened. In 1591, Judar Pasha marched south for the Saadian Sultan with arquebusiers and cannon dragged like insults across dust. At Tondabai, Songhai's host looked enormous, horsemen glittering, infantry layered like a dune face. Powder beats courage at certain distances. Cattle released to break the Moroccan line spooked at the blast and turned the wrong way, trampling men who trusted them. This was the moment everything changed at the top. Askia Ishak II fled. Cities didn't burn, but authority shattered. Gao's markets still opened. Timbuktu's scholars still wrapped manuscripts at dusk. Ferries still crossed the Niger at first light. But governors hedged, factions sprouted, and the Moroccan garrison demanded arrears the land couldn't pay. The river moved. The ledger didn't. Action in homes turned to preservation. Manuscript families sealed libraries in trunks, plastered niches, or moved folios house to house. Scholars migrated to safer patronage. Some slipped downriver, some taught in courtyards instead of halls. Chronicle pronouns shifted. We to they, then those before us. Impact lingers on paper and habit. Tens of thousands of manuscripts, astronomy tables, legal opinions, commercial letters, poetic praise, survived humidity and mice by stubborn hands. Trade law persisted as custom under new flags. Administrative reflexes, the audit of a granary, the rotation of a canal crew, the record of a levy echoed in small towns long after imperial trumpets died. But there was one problem no court could ignore. When wind made a cheaper route, the premium for sand dropped. Coastal factories siphoned gold and captives. Taghaze's salt fell to sea salt in barrels. A choke point is a bet against alternatives. Songhai won that bet for centuries by making trust redeemable at distance. Once barrels and hulls outpaced hoof and hull, the calculus turned. A microscene holds the hinge. Night in Timbuktu. A scribe trims a reed, rubs ink, and wraps a client's ledger while horses shuffle outside the gate. He's copied a cargo list, a debt acknowledgement, and a clause naming judges in 3 cities. He presses the seal, blows once to dry, and hears a crack, arquebus, not thunder. He doesn't look up. He ties the knot tighter. Vanishing arrived as edits, not erasure. Askia lineages splintered, puppet regimes postured, towns paid twice. Yet the toolset kept moving, portable trust, layered courts, schedules that respect water. When sea rewrote the margins, the river kept its grammar. The empire lost its name. Its ledger kept our rules. The Srivijaya thalassocracy, the empire you couldn't see from land. Trade winds turned, tides flipped, and a court that looked like a monastery ran a customs empire you couldn't sketch from shore. From mudbanks and mangroves at Sumatra's southeast, Srivijaya made lanes into laws. Its palace was a tide table. Its walls were pilots who knew crosswinds by smell. Stakes lived in passages, not acres. Control the Malacca and Sunda Straits, and every hull between India and China paused for your permission. You didn't need to conquer neighbors, you invoiced them. You didn't pave highways, you dredged bars, sounded channels, posted buoys made of memory. The danger was ruthless. If sediment shuffled a channel or a rival trained captains down a new lane, your capital disappeared without moving a house. Action sat at a strange intersection, monastery and customs house. Chinese pilgrims on their way to Nalanda stopped to translate sutras and get cargo seals stamped. Sanskrit inscriptions praised kings as guardians of the Dharma and the sea, which in practice meant guarantors of fair weights, safe anchorages, and rapid dispute settlements. Monasteries doubled as bonded warehouses. A bell rang at dawn. A harbor scribe and a learned monk walked the same quay. Meanwhile, diplomacy rode the monsoon. Envoys sailed north with tribute lists, camphor, benzoin, turtle shell, gold, dust, and came back with investiture titles that functioned like trade licenses. Letters to the Chola court in India read careful, gifts out, permissions back, pilotage acknowledged. Srivijaya didn't need to be the biggest.